All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Liftoff series here live on LinkedIn. Today, I'm super excited to have Tim Kachuriak on the line. What is up, Tim? How are you?
Hey, T-Shank, what's going on?
Hanging in there, living the dream. No gasoline right now in my state. I'm in North Carolina, and we have a new crisis on our hands. So that's always fun. But, I've gotten used to being at home all the time.
Yeah, well, that's great. You can work anywhere.
Exactly. So today we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship and things that you've learned in the trenches of it, both in your first experience with it as an accidental entrepreneur, and then moving on and choosing it with your own free will. But first, give us a quick intro on who you are, what you're about, and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Tim Kachuriak, and I'm the founder and chief innovation and optimization officer for a company called Next After, which is really three things. We're a fundraising research lab, we're a consultancy, and we're a training institute. And we can talk more about that, I guess, as we go along here today.
Awesome. Sounds good. So I want to start with the accidental entrepreneur topic, because you told me that the first time you started a company, it was like you were kind of thrown into it. And I think it's really relevant right now because a lot of people are dealing with this. I have several friends who have started their own company right now because maybe they got laid off by COVID or their company was shifting or things like that. And so I think it's a really relevant topic that's going to sit with a lot of people right now who are also going through this on their own, or even maybe about to get thrown into it. Who knows?
Sure. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that first experience and some things that you ran into and learned from it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really different when you choose to be an entrepreneur versus when entrepreneurship actually chooses you. And for me, my first experience was the latter, where I graduated from college right after 9/11, which is like a horrible, horrible time to enter into the job force, especially for somebody who wanted to break in the field of marketing and advertising. But fortunately, I worked at a country club all during high school and college. So I like to joke I had 432 aunts and uncles that were captains of industry, right? So I went to my Rolodex, and I contacted the guy who was the president of the country club. He also happened to be the president of the second largest ad agency in Pittsburgh, where I grew up. So I met with him. I said, "Hey, Joe, can I come meet with you?" Went down to his offices, did my little dog and pony show. And he was like, he's like, "Oh, I'd love to hire you." And he started to wring his hands and look down. He's like, "But you know what? We just laid off 30 people yesterday. I mean, 9/11 has hit our agency hard and like the industry harder. And I'm sorry, I just can't help you during this time." And so I was like, huh. And so I spent the next 6 months just kind of like wandering in the wilderness, just trying to find somebody that would give me a shot. And I was actually playing in a golf outing, and I met this serial entrepreneur. And I was telling him about what I'm trying to do. And he's like, "Well, maybe you can do a couple projects for some of these little businesses I operate." And I said, "Yeah, it sounds great." And he said, "You know what? Why don't you start a business?" And I said, "I don't know how to do that." He's like, "Well, I do. We've got an incubator on the second floor of our office building. I'll give you a desk. I'll introduce you to people, be your partner, and the rest is up to you, kid." And so I'm looking around. I'm like, well, what do I got to lose? I'm living in my parents' basement. I've got like no romantic interests in my life. There's nothing else going on, no overhead. So I was like, sure, why not? Yeah. So I started this company called Ambience. I think at the first it was called Ambience Marketing Services, where we would just do anything marketing related. And we did like weird things. I bought all this video equipment. We made TV commercials for a couple Harley Davidson dealerships and car dealerships. And then we kind of gravitated more towards digital. And I hired this guy that was really talented digital developer and artist. I mean, he was like just very multi-talented person. And, we kind of took off a little bit. I ended up hooking up with some of the general market ad agencies in town, where this is a time back 2002 when they were still outsourcing a lot of the digital stuff to little boutiques like us. And so, that was kind of like my meal ticket, was really just being latched onto these different agencies. But that also meant that we were kind of like connected and like wired into their client base. And, it is what it is, right? But during that time, I just experienced so much growth as a person, right? So, just try to put yourself in my shoes, right? So I'm just graduating college. I'm like this kind of, smooth-faced kid that has no experience working in the real world. And I was incredibly, incredibly insecure, right? And I think what that caused me to do is just overshoot like the bar all the time, right? I was over prepared. Whatever I had to do to try to win a client, I would go over and above, right? Put on these elaborate, presentation stuff. And they're like, wow, this is really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to think that like insecurity almost became a competitive advantage, right? Because I was so, just uncertain as to how people would receive me. And I felt insecure because I had no background, no experience, no business being in this position, that I think it caused me to work harder and to try harder. And so that was a great experience. And then just the whole, experience of being an entrepreneur. I mean, like having to meet payroll, like we had a small staff of 5 people eventually. And Monday we didn't have enough money in the bank to meet payroll. And by Friday, doggone it, every single person got a paycheck. And I took great pride too. We had a little office, and I'd be the first one to get there in the morning, and I would sweep the floors at night. You know what I mean? Just like all the stuff to kind of keep an operation moving. And it was just such a great educational experience, like a PhD in business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting. A lot of leaders of top companies even struggle with imposter syndrome, and you had it too, right? And I like the idea of I just tried really, and you still do.
Yeah.
Oh, we all do.
Yeah, I know.
We all do. Exactly. So, because we all get in our own heads, right? So tell me a little bit, what was a particularly gritty moment? I like that you mentioned you're like, I don't know, Monday payroll, by Friday we had it.
Yeah.
How did you push through that? I'm sure a lot of people are also experiencing that, right? If they run a small company, how did you push through that? How did you make it happen? Maybe give us a story.
Well, I'll give you a story of like a very tough lesson I learned, right? So it's funny how like sometimes the biggest burns can be the greatest learning opportunities. So I was scheduled to go meet with the owner of, it was actually the second oldest Harley Davidson dealership in the nation. It was in Denora, Pennsylvania, on the National Road in Uniontown, Pennsylvania. And we had this meeting on the books for like probably 2 months. And the night before, I was up really, really, really late working on another client's project. And I woke up in the morning and there's just like, a light little dusting of snow, which in Western Pennsylvania is like no big deal, right? So I emailed this guy early in the morning and I said, hey, I know we have this meeting scheduled, but, I was up late working on another client's thing and, a little bit of snow on the road. So let's just reschedule. And he sent me back this long email. He said, you know what? I have no desire to reschedule with you. Do you know what you just communicated to me? That other client is more important than me. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm your only client, right? And like that just absolutely burned like the inside. It was like drinking gasoline, it just got to the very like innards of my soul. And I was so just like, and again, it really preyed on that insecurity that I had. And I was like, what do I do? I feel horrible. He's right, and how do I turn this thing around? So, I humbly called him and, hat in hand, I said, look, you're absolutely right. I have no, there's no reason why you should meet with me. I've showed you tremendous disrespect and, blah, 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 blah. And he, graciously gave me another shot and they became one of our greatest clients. And I would have missed all that, but that lesson is still burned inside of me. It doesn't matter how many clients you are. It doesn't matter what size this client is versus that size client. As far as they're concerned, they are your only client and you have to treat them that way. So that was a huge lesson that I learned early. And thank God it didn't have to like ruin me, right? It wasn't like when the stakes were super, super high. So that was, that's just one example of many of just, learning on the fly.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and just customer relationships and having empathy for the fact that like they're paying you and in their mind, that's all they care about. They're paying you for a service or a product or whatever. And so like thinking about how to go into every relationship with them as the number one front and center whenever you're communicating with them, I think is a really good lesson.
One more thing too, just so there's no way that I would have been able to start this business had the prior 9 years I hadn't developed relationships with people that I could go to, and had an established relationship with. So, I mean, I guess this is another lesson for anybody that's entering into like a new chapter in entrepreneurship. Is whatever you're doing right now is preparation for what you may be doing later, right? And it may not look the same, but like having relationships with other people is probably one of the most important things you can do to prepare yourself for that next step, right? Because those are the people that are probably going to give you your shot. They have a personal relationship with you. Maybe they're not the person themselves, but they can connect you to people that could be your customer. So just building relationships today creates a great foundation to build a business on tomorrow.
Totally, 100%. I was talking to someone earlier this week who's trying to build her consultancy, right? And it was like, hey, like what's the fastest path to getting a bigger pipeline, right? And it's one of my answers was like, it's a long game. You got to focus on relationships because it's so true. And if you focus on that and you bring value to people and you focus on being a nice person who does good work, who brings value, it starts to come in, right? Without having to be like, I got to go chase everything all the time. Right.
Well, Kachuriak, you do this so well. I mean, like that's why you will always be successful. You have always been really focused on building, strong. I mean, I remember the first time you and I met, we were supposed to be mortal enemies, if you remember, right?
Yeah.
And you were taught to like hate me because I was like the competition. I was like, hey, I'm not so bad, And we went out, we had a great night. We sang karaoke. I mean, it was a great time, right?
Yeah.
So
we made up and now we're best friends, Yeah.
Buddies
exactly.
to the max. That's right.
Well, that came up on another episode that we did. Who was I? I was talking to, I think it was, it was Scott Miller. We were talking about be friends with the competition. And I agree because it's like you just, whether someone does the same thing that you do and is a competitor, we're all people. You can be nice to each other. And so I'm glad we're friends now.
Yeah, I've got a great way to package that. So I don't think of competition anymore. I think of everybody as industry allies. If we're all working in the same space and we're all trying to do the same thing, there's plenty of business to go around, right? Why spend so much time and effort trying to beat the other guy? Like, let's find ways to actually partner together. And we found that a lot of people that should be our competition today are partners because of that.
Yeah. Exactly. And if you ever need to break through, go to karaoke with someone. Like that'll
it's like a knife through butter, right?
That's a whole different level.
And you're a way better singer than I am, but
I pretend. Amy just said, literally just had this conversation with a competitor yesterday, room for all. Totally agree. That's good. Thanks for chiming in, Amy. Okay, so let's talk about, you started business number one. How long did it take you to get out of your parents' basement?
Let's see. Well, I got married during that time too, which is a whole nother part of the story.
That'll push you out of the basement.
Well, that did. Yeah. And actually my wife was supposed to be the breadwinner and then she lost her job on our honeymoon. So she ended up like coming to work for us. So that was a whole nother experience. But I think after year two, like there was at least some sort of predictability to our revenue streams. And we figured out some ways to have some sort of recurring revenue built into our service-based business. I think we were like reselling hosting and, stuff like that. So that really helped out a lot. But yeah, it probably took a couple years, honestly. I mean, it was very bootstrapped in the very early days. And it's kind of like you take on anything, right? Anything that pays money. Like you do whatever kind of project you can take on. And then you begin to you begin to discover what business you're actually really in. So that was the other thing that was kind of interesting. You discover it along the way. It's not something you can necessarily declare.
Yeah. I don't know. I just started and I'm not taking on anything, but maybe I'm just stupid financially. No, but like I am actually from the start of my thing trying to say like, no, I don't do that. Like things that are close that I can do. I think this is another lesson is taking on the right business actually. And just because you're new at it, so I'm going to challenge this, just because you're new at it and you have a new business, if you take on too much of the wrong business, it doesn't allow you to focus on getting the right business. So
yeah, just depends on how desperate you are.
Depends on how desperate you are. Yeah, That is true. Okay, so take my comment with a grain of salt. Okay. All right, let's get into the second company. So that was the first company. You did that for how long?
5 years. Yep.
5 years. Okay. And then fast forward in time to when you decided at this point you wanted to start Next After. And you told me that like at that point, you had 3 kids, you got a mortgage, and now you're like, hey, I think it's time to be an entrepreneur again. What was going on in your brain at that point in time?
Yeah. So totally different deal. So the two stories kind of like they bleed into each other. So let me put an end cap on that first one. So I was doing this for about 5 years, and we were working with all different kinds of like automotive dealerships and lawyers and making websites and stuff. Nothing wrong with like lawyers and car dealers, right? But it didn't spin my wheels. I was always more of a cause guy, right? And so my church was doing a capital campaign to build a new building. And I volunteered our agency to do all the marketing materials for that campaign. And that was the first time that I was doing marketing, like something I felt like I was wired to do, but for a cause I cared about. And I was like, that feels good. That feels right. Right. And so like, I was like, I don't want to go back and make car dealership websites anymore. So I called my friend anyway, went to work for a nonprofit organization for a couple of years. And then I discovered that there's basically like these agencies that work with nonprofits, like marketing agencies that work with nonprofits. I had no idea this existed. And the nonprofit I work for was working with an agency based out of Dallas called KMA Direct Communications. And actually up on my wall there is Tom McCabe from KMA. Yeah. He was one of my mentors. And he said, look, we've been doing direct mail for 30 years, trying to help raise money for nonprofits. We're trying to figure out digital. Would you come to Dallas and help us start a digital fundraising division? I'm like, sounds great, So that's how I got to Dallas in 2008. And that was kind of like a journey of entrepreneurship, right? So it wasn't my own business, but I was actually like starting this new division within an existing company, which was pretty cool because they already have like a client base. They could go kind of set up meetings. And like, I don't have to worry about like where my next dollar is coming from because I'm drawing a salary. Right. But it was during that time, like in the early, probably first 6 months of that, I was like, this place sucks, and it wasn't that the company was bad. It was just like, they hired a bunch of executives at the same time. We're stepping all over each other. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to go start my own business again. Right. I'm done with this. And so I talked to all of my mentors in my life and they said, yeah, of course you're an entrepreneur. Definitely makes sense. And I even was open with the leadership of KMA. I said, hey guys, look, I know you hired me to come do this. I don't think it's the right fit. And they're like, look, we get it. We'll give you a soft landing. We'll let you consult back for a period of time and let you go do your thing. So every single person in my life was giving me the green light. And I had this conversation with my brother. And my brother and I were super close. I mean, growing up, we're very different interests. He's like big and strong and I'm not, and he played sports and I didn't. But he said, hey man, that sounds cool. It sounds like you got a great plan, but can I ask you a question? Are you ever really happy? Are you ever content? It just seems like you're always angling for the bigger, better deal for Tim. Whoosh. Oh my gosh, it hit me like a ton of bricks. He like smacked me right between the eyes with like a serious truth bomb. And he was absolutely right. He was right. Yeah. Because, when I lived in South Florida and I worked at this nonprofit, like I couldn't afford to get into the housing market. But when we moved to Dallas, I bought a house and it was the nicest house I've ever lived in. But our house wasn't nice enough. And the cars we drove weren't nice enough. So of course my job, I was going to be discontent with that because it was not an issue with the company. It was an issue with Tim. So I was at a decision point. I said, look, I can go and chase this thing for the rest of my life, or I can say, look, it doesn't feel great right now, but I'm sticking this thing out. Right. And I decided to do that. And so I went back to the leadership of KMA hat in hand. I said, hey, look, I know I said I was going to do this, but I'd really like to stick it out if you give me another chance. And they said, of course, And so after that, like looking back, it was just like, I could do no wrong. I mean, I was like strapped to a rocket and like, the digital division took off and like, we were able to do so much for some really big high profile clients. And I was able to develop a reputation as this like digital fundraising guy. Right. Which was awesome. And I would have missed all of that had I left. Would I have been successful? Maybe, probably, but like it would have been so much smaller than what I was able to do. So I was at KMA for about 2.5 years and then we got acquired by the Pursuant Group and I was there for another 18 months. And at that point it was time to leave, right? Like,
Mhm.
it was a much bigger organization at that point. And I felt very just disoriented. I just didn't feel like I fit in, right? And so I was like, okay, now's the time to go. But I had all of this experience. I had all of like these conferences that I went and spoke at like over the last 5 years, and I was able to develop this reputation as being this digital guy. And so then when I left to start Next After, I had so much more momentum in my favor. And because I was actually a valuable part of that company, Pursuant was gracious enough to give me a very soft landing. Like I actually consulted back with them for a period of 6 months, which actually like afforded me like, I think it was like 93% of my salary for 50% of my time. Right. And so I had the other 50% of my time to play with. And I was able to kind of like, ramp up this business while I was ramping down my existing, responsibilities at the other agency. And so that was like, it was a huge blessing to have that opportunity. But I think if I wasn't so invaluable to my previous employer, and this is a great lesson for anybody that's working somewhere and wants to start a business, if you can become incredibly invaluable to your existing company, there may be a nice off ramp for you to go and launch your other business without having to risk it all. Because it was really risky at that point. At that point, I did have a mortgage and I had 3 children and I was the primary breadwinner. My wife didn't, she stayed at home. And so I had to figure out how to pull all this stuff off with lots more to risk, right? And so I'm always just trying to, as an entrepreneur, as a business person, and just as like a normal human, I'm trying to mitigate risk as much as I possibly can. And so that was one way I was able to do that, is just by, becoming invaluable at my previous company.
Well, and that goes back to the relationship building, over time. And that's why it's so important. So I'm curious to hear from you if there's anything in that, based on what you've learned in all of the process of these things, anything that you would go back and change and do differently?
Ooh, well,
to put you on the spot or anything.
I don't know if it's, I'm so like such an optimist that I don't like say like, I don't ever have regrets. I just have like, kind of like, wow, I would have missed this lesson. So let me give you an example of like how Next After has evolved. So when I first started Next After, what I thought we would be was like a consultant to the consultants, right? So my early clients were like agencies and technology companies that worked with nonprofits. And my idea was, I was like, okay, cool. I want to multiply and leverage my my influence. And so what I can do is go and help these different companies start this fundraising optimization discipline within their organization, right? I'll go teach them how to do what I do. The problem with that model is that the optimization stuff was really sexy. And so I basically just kind of turned into this glorified salesperson. And I was like, wait, I'm just like working to go build somebody else's business. That doesn't work, right? And so then we started working with nonprofits directly. And that was kind of like the business took this next, spin in this different direction where we could actually like go develop the strategy, get the client to buy off, big piece of it. I mean, strategy without great execution isn't worth the paper it's written on, right? So that was a big thing. But yeah, I mean, just as it continues to evolve, I mean, the weird thing about, so we have 32 employees now, but in the beginning, there was just me. In the whole first year and a half, it was just me. And when you are a single shingle entrepreneur, you wear lots of different hats. You're the primary, business, rainmaker, right? You are the primary marketer. You're the person that has to service the client or, the product or whatever it is you're selling, right? You also have to deal with all the finances, right? Like actually, getting invoices out and getting them paid, and QuickBooks makes it really easy, but it's still something you have to learn. Oh, and then the big lesson of like the difference between like revenue and cash flow. Whoa, right? It's like
totally I just had this conversation 2 days ago.
Wait, I should be rich. Look at this. No. Yeah. That is not money. That is called revenue, which is not money until it turns into cash. So it's just like all these kind of like things that you have to do in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then the hardest journey for me now in this kind of like new chapter of Next After, as we've continued to grow, I had to start to cut away at the things that I thought defined who I was, right? So like I was always this, this individual performer, right? I would go and do the thing, right? I would go and do the thing and I would do it all soup to nuts and I have to figure it out. But I had to let go of that. And when Jeff and Kevin came on board, which were the first two real employees at Next After, they were like, look, man, if we're going to help you build this company, like it can't be the Tim show, right? So you can't do these things anymore. And like, thank God they had that sort of like, just foreknowledge that if we were really going to build a business, it couldn't be built just around one personality. Right. And so I had to pull back, and that was hard. Right. Because, you have to watch people, make mistakes, maybe do things differently than you, right? Maybe get to the same kind of outcome in terms of like meeting or exceeding the client's expectation, but they take a very different path to getting there, which is really hard. Right. And so I have like in the last, 8 or 9 years, I guess, have been just really having to learn to let go and let go and let go. But then you get to this point, and this is what like they tell you, like good leadership, you continue to work yourself out of a job, but then you get to a certain point, you're like, well, what do I do? You know what I mean?
What
like,
do I do?
What is my thing? And so I'm kind of at that like existential point in my career where I'm just like, okay, I never gave myself the title CEO. And that was because like, I don't think that that's something you just give to yourself. I think you have to earn that. Right. And so I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary at Next After, and I'm hoping to interview and actually accept the position of CEO for Next After. I think I'm ready to do that. And that means that it's not about at all me and what I contribute. It's about actually how I elevate everybody else to their highest level of contribution. And that's not my nature. So I've been learning that the last several years, right? So I'm in training. I am a CEO in training, and I'm hoping to get there soon.
Interesting. That's an interesting perspective and a different way to look at it. When did you get to, how far in were you when you got to the point at which you were like, I need to hire these people, these other roles? Well, and how did you kind of come to the like, and this is the role that I need to hire for?
Yeah, the first hire was easy. I was like, I just need to duplicate myself, right? So like I have too much work to be able to handle by myself. And there was kind of like a pipeline. I saw it was coming. So I was like, okay, I need somebody to duplicate myself. And we did. And we doubled revenue. And so I was like, okay, cool. Now we got 2 people jogging, down this path. And then the big change, I think, is when Kevin came on board, because Kevin had a different skill set. He did initially like some of this, he was doing client service and the whole thing, but like Kevin's highest and best use is really on like the technical side, on the execution side, on the data side, like all those things that like Jeff and I pretend to do, like Kevin could really do, right? And also we would outsource a lot of the execution, which means if we could bring that in-house, instead of making 20% margin on a project, right? Because we're outsourcing it, we're making now 80% margin on the project. So it's a whole different game in terms of revenue. So that was a big move going from 2 to 3. And we kind of operated like that, and that it was like the 3 guys in a truck thing for a few years like that. And then we got to a point where we're like, okay, well, now we need to figure out how to begin to scale like, ourselves and like start to build like some sort of organization. Honestly, like I think initially I was so resistant to any sort of structure. And I think Jeff and Kevin were like that too. Like, cause we were in like most agencies are very, very, very highly structured, right? You have like timesheets and clocks and all that stuff. I'm like, dude, the day I have to fill out a time sheet is my last day at Next After. We still don't do it, but like you have to figure out how to manage all that stuff.
Yes.
It's no bueno.
I hate them.
Everybody hates them. Yeah. It's no good.
But well, you know what I think your role is now? Your role is you continue to build relationships for the company with people.
That's right.
You continue to be a voice. You continue to be an evangelist, and you show up and you talk to people like me on podcasts. Isn't that fun?
That is fun.
And you don't have to fill out a timesheet anymore.
No way.
Probably
no
not.
Way. Yeah.
I am. No, I like what you said about, and I was actually just having this conversation with my husband yesterday, and we'll wrap up here soon. Thanks, Shannon, for joining us. I'm glad you're enjoying this. Same thing, because I'm in the beginning stages. I like what you said about being an entrepreneur, because I have felt like that for a long time and always known like, I got the bug to do my own thing. Finally started noodling on it 6 months ago, and in April just like took that leap too and was like, I'm just going to do this. And now I'm grappling with the, like Okay, I have to learn how finances actually work, and I have to be the salesperson, and I also have to do the client work. And I outsource things to a lot of people right now, so that's my model and stuff. But I'm also thinking like, okay, when I'm getting busy, so like I'm gonna need some sort of assistant and account management or project management, and like at what time do you pull that in and all of that. So it can
Right.
be a lonely place to be in the very early stages. It's really exciting, but it can also be lonely where you're like, I'm having to make all of this stuff happen all on my own. And at the same time, it makes you stretch and grow. And I'm learning things that you can do in Google Sheets with accounting that I never knew before. So that's, fun and not fun all at the same time. But
Right.
if you're listening to this and maybe in the same spot and feeling the same way, like that's normal too.
Yeah.
And we're here for you.
Yeah. Actually, one other thing you said just triggered another thought of something you can do to prepare. Like if you want to start a business or a venture or something, like something you can do right now is work on developing your personal brand. I mean, I cannot like overstate that. The reason why I had opportunities when I left and started my own company is because, I hustled, right? I'd go to every conference I could. I went and, met and shook everybody's hands I could. I would go and get every single speaking gig I could to try to position myself as an expert in our space. And maybe that's just like glorified self-promotion, or maybe that's very prudent, preparation for an entrepreneurial journey. And I think it's the latter, honestly. I mean, I think that that's something that everybody can do, is really try to make themselves visible and known. And if you want to be looked at as an expert in your field, you have to start acting like it, right? You have to start actually like contributing to the conversations. And Taylor, that's something, again, you do exceptionally well. And it's something that, I think people like us that do want to move into this entrepreneurial journey, like almost do instinctively, right? Without even thinking about it.
Yeah, I think you're right. 1,000% agree with that. I think it's why I'm busy now, even though I just started my company a month ago, really. So it pays off. Don't consider a personal brand building a waste of time. I think that's also something where that imposter syndrome comes into. People like, well, I don't want to just self-promote all the time. There's a way to do it without it coming off like just weird and like, oh, this is the Tim show or this is the Taylor show, right? And
here's one way to do that.
Just try some things.
Yeah. So here's one way to do that. Don't focus on trying to promote yourself. Focus on trying to help other people, right?
Exactly.
So the best marketing is not something you do to people. It's something you do for people, right? So help people every chance you can.
Totally. Just be helpful. Okay. Quick question from Sean, and then we'll ask how people can find you, get in touch. All right. Question for Tim. Any other advice for people starting the career? I work in fundraising almost 26 years. Finished my BS 3 years ago, hoping to go into entrepreneurship in the future. So it sounds, again, kind of like you were back when you were living in the basement and schmoozing on the golf course. Any other advice for like someone young trying to get into entrepreneurship from the start?
Yeah, I mean, just go and make it happen, right? So like go and tap into your personal network. And if you have like some sort of skill or something of value that you can offer to them, go pitch it. Right. And say, hey, look, I see an opportunity for me to go help you with this thing. Will you give me a shot? Right. And the worst they can say is no, get away from me. Right. The best thing they can say is like, sure. And if you do have a personal relationship, you'll be surprised like how much that actually like influences people's decision. People do business with people, right? Not with companies or machines or websites. They do business with people. So the more that you can really leverage that personal network, I think the more successful you can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Just be helpful. And Dan chimed in too, offering value. Dan, by the way, Dan Summers on the line. He's also done a great job. I've been watching him build his personal brand over the last couple of years. What's up, man? Good to see you. All right. Well, hey, Tim, this has been really insightful. Hopefully it was helpful to a lot of people today. I appreciate your insights. If people want to get in touch, follow along, learn more from you, what's the best way to do that? Are you a Twitter guy, LinkedIn guy, Instagram guy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn.
Karaoke guy.
LinkedIn more than Twitter, but I mean, honestly, like the best place, just go to nextafter.com. Like all the stuff that we do and that we talk about is all there. So you can go and have at it.
Awesome. Hey, one day we're going to get back at a conference in person and we're going to sing karaoke again. All right.
Neo Summit. Are you coming to Neo? Nonprofit
I would,
Innovation Optimization Summit. It
yes.
is end of September, Austin, Texas. Willy Wonka. It's all themed Willy Wonka, Chocolate River, the whole nine. I mean, it's going to be insane. Yeah.
All right. I'll see you there. I'm
Yep.
going to Planet Philanthropy in June.
Okay.
Like that's literally the first in-person thing I'm doing again. So I'm very excited about it.
NIO Summit. Go to NIO
Yeah.
Summit.
All right. NIO Summit.
All right.
It's on the Next After website, I assume.
Yeah. Or just go to niosummit.com.
All right. We'll see you there. I'm going to challenge you to a competition on the karaoke stage once again. If you tuned into this and you want to go to NIO Summit, join us there. We'll see you in Austin.
Challenge accepted. Thank you, Tim.
All right. Thanks, Tim. Hope this was helpful, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye now.